We'll go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us and welcome to the 2025 Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority Business Plan Update. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today to learn about our updates and provide feedback. And joining us today, we have Leo Sanchez, our Deputy Managing Director. We also have Joel Cox, our Manager of Engineering, Camille Tsao, our Manager of Special Projects. I'm Sabrina, and I'm a Senior Marketer with Capital Corridor. And then we also have Kai Moser, who's our Climate Corps Fellow, monitoring the chat. So for today's workshop, just a couple of housekeeping items. So all participant cameras will be turned off, as well as audio. This workshop is recorded and will be available afterwards on our YouTube channel. So look for this next week on our YouTube. And then lastly, the Q&A feature is what you will use to submit your comments. Please do not use the chat function for comments. If you have technical issues or cannot hear or something like that, please use chat. Otherwise, for comments and questions about the business plan, please use the Q&A feature. All right, I hand it over to Leo.
Thanks, Sabrina, for the overview. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Leo Sanchez. I'm the Deputy Managing Director with Capital Corridor. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the business plan. Here laid out in front of you is a series of the timeline of what we have prepared for you. So this past Friday, we did publish the draft public business plan on the website. So that is available as a PDF document for you to access and read. And we're going to be having public workshops. Thank you all for joining us for the first one of the week. We're going to have another on Friday that will be virtual, and then we're going to have a few throughout the week that are going to be on board. So if you are planning to take the train, you may see some of us riding some of these trains for the workshops. And just a quick reminder, you do have until the 28th of the month to submit your public comment. We're going to be taking all the feedback, comments, suggestions, and respond to those that need responses, and then have that ready to take to the board on our April board meeting on the 16th of April, and with the final draft to present for the board, and we'll include all the comments as part of the board packet. Next slide. All right, and before I get too far into it, we'll probably be stopping throughout the slide presentation. That way we give you an opportunity to ask some questions, especially if they're relevant to the slides that are being shown. And I see that there's already a few Q&As that have been populating, and we'll just let some of those trickle in. And I'm just going to get into the business plan highlight, share a little bit of content, and then we'll pause and we'll start taking some questions, so that way we can hear you all. Really, this is intended to be interactive session and get as much feedback as possible and respond on the moment as much as we can. And for those that we can't respond immediately, we'll come back to you with a response. So anyway, here we're going to be getting into the performance standards. We'll talk about our planned operating plan, give you some updates on safety and security, talk to you about what's happening on the rolling stock front, talk about some service enhancements that includes reliability projects and some capital projects to enhance or expand service, talk about our onboard service amenities, talk about our marketing and communications plan, and just our overall funding request that we're including as part of this business plan. Next slide. So to give you a quick recap of where we have been and where we're currently headed, on the very left hand, you can see prior to the pandemic really starting in 2019, where our ridership was at. And the dashed line actually has an average of ridership. So if you see that dashed blue line on the top, that's our average FY19 ridership. It's just to serve as a barometer and really let you get a pulse of how things are going. And you can see on average, we were right around 150,000 passengers per month. And you can see what the trend has looked like overall, increasing since the bottom of the pandemic. the increases more recently have slowed down, but we still have not quite plateaued. So we're still seeing a nice and steady modest increase. And we'll see how that continues with a lot of the changes of remote work happening, especially in our bay, in our backyard, and how that affects our travel patterns. Next slide. So to talk to you a little bit about our performance goals, we all like KPIs, and we have ours shown on here. So you can see our ridership goal for FY25. Again, that's the federal fiscal year that goes from October of 2024 and continues through September of 2024. Ridership, our goal for this year is 1.2 million. Last year was our first year that we exceeded a million. So this is a nice goal to keep going after increased ridership. And then similarly, that translates to increased revenue, and 26.8 million is our target for revenue. On-time performance is an area that we historically were at 90% or better on our on-time performance. Since the pandemic happened, that has been an area that has slipped, and we've been more in the mid to high 80s compared to pre-pandemic service on our on-time performance. So there's a variety of challenges that are the reasons that the on-time performance has slipped, and we'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation. And then lastly, the measure showed on here, fare box recovery, which is maybe the least tangible to understand just by the name, is 50%. And what that means is that essentially when you look at all of our costs, we are shooting for having half of that covered by revenue. And that's all types of revenue. That's ticket revenue as well as onboard cafe sales. So 50% is what we're striving for, and we're getting close to that. We've been in the high 40s on fare box recovery. Next slide. And in terms of where we're headed in the future, so you can see the 2024 a little bit into 25, the solid line shows us the actual ridership. And we do have a lot of seasonality trends in our ridership. That was true before the pandemic, and that's still true today. So you can see that generally we start picking up in certain times of the year. Like right now, we're actually in that moment where we're now climbing out of the low point that happens in December and January, and we start going up in ridership, and really peaks in May usually, then it dips, and then it goes back up in the fall. So similarly, that's what we're seeing here on our projections, and you can see kind of some of the high and low scenarios. And barring any real safety concerns, I think it's pretty realistic that we'll probably be closer to where the dash line is showing to potentially the top of the chart, just seeing how remote work patterns are changing, especially currently in this environment. So we'll see how that continues. Next slide. All right, and here is probably one of the topics that's most exciting for all of you to see. We've been talking about our service levels and where we've been operating on, and for those of you that have been with us for 5 years or even longer, you know that historically we ran 30 weekday trains, 22 weekend trains. Then during the pandemic, we've significantly reduced that number, and we've very consciously been working to increase that level of service and get us back up to the maximum level of service that we had previously. We're currently running 24 weekday trains. The weekend service is fully restored. And what you see here is some of the plans that are happening, some of them pretty soon, and then some of them later in the year. So in the middle column, you can see what we're planning. We're saying planned summer of 25, that hopefully happens sometime May through June. We're targeting for these service increases. So we're planning to go up to 28 weekday trains. And the other area to make note of is the Oakland to San Jose portion on the weekdays. We are running one short of the full service, so we're planning to fully restore that service south of Oakland. And then for those of you that have been really wanting us to add more trains, as I saw one of the comments on the Q&A, we are looking to fully restore service this fall and get us that last round trip in the fall. So I guess to answer some of the questions in terms of the why behind why we're not running that service today and why can't we go any sooner, and maybe address some of the Q&A questions. The first one is that we are constrained and limited by the equipment. So today we're running our current service with 8 train consists. That means 1 locomotive and usually 4 cars, sometimes 5 cars. With each train set. So that there's 8 of those today. And we are limited by the number of equipment right now, but we are going to be looking at getting additional equipment from the San Joaquin service, which is currently putting into service the new Siemens Venture cars. They're single level cars. You may have seen them running out on the service on the San Joaquin side. And now they're getting close to running enough venture sets that it'll free up equipment. And right now we're working closely with LoSan as well, and we're trying to figure out how we prioritize the equipment that's being distributed. Once we have equipment, then really that's where we have the 9th set, and that's when we have the ability to go back to where we used to be with 30 weekday trains. So that's kind of a little explanation of what's happening. We've been looking at the current modeling with the current equipment, and it looks like we have the ability to go up to as many as 28 trains. And that's what we're trying to do here in the short term, to at least get a little bit more service, make some improvements. And then probably the most important part, besides going to full service, is that we do want your feedback. We are working with a consultant to get your feedback, to get other feedback that can incorporate your thoughts, your wishes for the service on what you would like to see into the fall schedule. So for the fall schedule, that one really will be the one where we'll be looking for soliciting input and getting feedback that will address some of those concerns and maybe address some of the gaps in the service that you would like addressed. So I'll pause there real quick and see what related questions have popped up, and I'm happy to take some of those right now.
Okay, great. So you answered Andrew's second question. Can you guys please add like 30 trains on the weekdays from San Jose to Emeryville and to Richmond, like at 9:30, going to San Jose at 10 and coming back from San Jose at 1 p.m. to Fremont. So it looks like you did answer this. One other question related to the schedule change is from Richard. He asks, schedules online dated January 2024. Why not have updated and current dated schedules online?
So they should be updated. And if for some reason you're seeing something that does not reflect that, then please let us know. And as we are looking to update schedules, then we will make them available online. And one of the things that we've done really over the last 4 or 5 years now is we've moved away from having the physical schedules at the stations and provided instead a QR code to make it a lot more accessible and real time in the updated schedules directly to the website. So if you are having issues with either of those, then let us know. And I can take a couple of the other questions that came through that Andrew had. Andrew had some really great questions. I think some of them that were about like just the general service and increase of frequency. So I think one of the things that I'd share first is that we are limited in the number of trains that we can run. We run on Union Pacific Railroad tracks almost exclusively. We do have a couple of miles that we go on Caltrain's rail. But with that comes restrictions on the number of trains that we're allowed to operate. So south of Oakland, the maximum we can run currently is 14 trains. And that's really every day of the week. And then from Oakland to Sacramento, that number is 30 today. There was additional slots that were purchased many years ago, but those are really truly shared between us and San Joaquin's. And then beyond Sacramento, you've heard about us talking about the Sac Roseville third track project. That really is the project that is geared to add first 2 round trips up to Roseville from Sacramento. So that would go from 1 to 3, and then eventually up to 10 round trips. But that is contingent on negotiations with Union Pacific and getting potentially some of this capital projects completed in order to make that happen. And similarly for additional service, that is what it takes is we need to look at what service expansions are need to happen in order for us to add service. But good feedback and good points.
And do you want to answer his other Sac to Roseville question, Leo? Will the Dash 8 pull more CC passenger cars? I think this is still related to Roseville.
I think it was is what I'm
or
thinking,
is that general?
but the answer is that right now we're actually using F-59 locomotives. They're the tier 2 locomotives, and Charger locomotives, which are the tier 4 locomotives. We do have plans to overhaul first the F-59 locomotives. I think that's actually part of the later slide. But I'll address that now. We do have plans for that to happen. That should be happening soon. That's a Caltrans led effort. And for those of you that join us for the board meetings, we're actually going to have Caltrans give a more detailed update on just the general equipment update. I think we haven't had them in a while prepare and present that for us, and you'll hear a lot more details about the equipment.
Great. Do you want to go ahead and move forward, and then we can answer some of these after? All right. Go to the next slide.
All right, so I talked a little bit about this one already, but just to do a quick recap. So one of the main challenges with full is currently equipment. So in the past, we had come to you and we brought up some of the main issues that were preventing us from going back to full service, because many of you were curious and wanted full service restored. One previously was actually funding resources, and at least for the next 3 years, we're actually looking in pretty good shape in terms of funding. The JPAs together with CalSTA were able to work on a plan to get additional funding resources to fully restore service. So at least on the funding front, we have that covered for the next few years. The main challenge is equipment, like I mentioned before, and mostly it's actually about rail cars, just having sufficient number of rail cars that can add increased service levels. But as we have additional Siemens Venture cars deployed in San Joaquin's right now, it looks like probably the soonest will be April when we'll start seeing some equipment flow our way, which will be good because even in advance of changing the schedule in the fall, we'll be able to add a little elbow room to some of the very crowded trains that we know are out there. Next slide. And rolling stock equipment update. So one of the projects that has been going on for at least about a year now is working to improve the trucks on the rail cars, which is basically like your car suspension. That project pilot started, and it had a slight delay just due to some engineering changes that needed to be made for the equipment, but is now proceeding in really a good shape now. So I think we'll start seeing a lot more cars released from the rolling stock maintenance shop in Stockton, and actually that one's being led by San Joaquin's and their maintainer, which is Tazzy. And so that one should continue along, and we'll start to see a lot more cars with better ride quality. And that takes me directly into the next point, which is about the equipment transition, which is to Tazzy, that's Transit America Services Incorporated. For those of you that have taken Caltrain or have taken ACE, the Altamont Corridor Express, both of those are maintained by the same maintainer. And so we are looking to start that transition probably within the next month or two, and that will give us an increased control of just being able to have a higher quality of product and more reliable fleet going into the future. That will directly lead into the fleet modernization, which is part of the state's initiative to refresh and renew the rail cars that haven't had a refreshment in many years. And so this will give you a better rider experience and eventually prepare us for the next generation. And then the last one, which is related to the question that was posed in the Q&A, locomotive overhaul. We do have plans to start the older locomotive, the F-59s overhaul. Those are our tier 2 locomotives that are used in Northern California between San Joaquin and Capital Corridor. and then eventually do the charger locomotives on the tail end of that, since they'll start being at that moment where they will also need overhaul. So coming soon. As I said, in the February board meeting, we'll have a lot more details in rolling stock. Next slide. All right, I'm going to hand it off here to our chief engineer, Joel Cox, and he'll take us through safety, security, and some reliability updates.
Oh, thank you so much, Leo. So the Capital Corridor has for a long time made investments in our physical route to help improve the service. And many of these improvements fall in the category of safety and security. So we have a right-of-way security program that which was recently awarded a $20 million grant from the federal government, which will help us to improve security along the right-of-way by constructing fences and other barriers to keep unauthorized people off of the tracks. And that will help our trains run more safely and with better on-time performance. Ongoing together with this, we also fund through the Union Pacific Railroad has their own Union Pacific police force known as special agents. And we fund 2 special agents that are dedicated to the Capital Corridor route. So those people tour the Capital Corridor line and make sure that any unauthorized people or activities are kept away from the tracks and kept safe so that they don't interfere with the train operations. We are in the midst of a grade crossing safety improvement program, which is sponsoring improvements or helping our partners. That would be the local municipalities, cities, and counties that own roads which cross the railroad tracks at grade. We are helping them to plan for improvements that will improve the safety at railroad grade crossing. The railroad grade crossings are a frequent source of accidents and delays along the Capital Corridor route. And so our board has identified this as an important area that needs improvement. Also, we work with the California Operation Lifesaver Group, which is a nonprofit educational organization that sponsors education for people to teach the public about the dangers associated with railroad tracks and how to keep yourself safe and away from trains. We also sponsor an ongoing station and right-of-way cleanup activities. So this is to both improve the cleanliness of the Union Pacific right-of-way, but also to keep people off of the right-of-way, keep away folks who may be setting up encampments along the tracks that seem like a good area, but in fact, being next to the tracks is kind of like living on a freeway. It's not a great place for homeless encampments. So we work to clean that up and to make sure that those activities don't interfere with the train operation. And finally, we have local law enforcement coordination as well. Next slide, please. So together with these improvements, we're also working on more significant capital improvements to our route, which will help with service reliability. So this means keeping our trains running more smoothly, more on time, with greater speed, fewer delays. We recently completed the Steege crossover and signal replacement project. So that is a crossover that's located between Berkeley and Richmond stations. And we were able to improve that for operation at a higher speed and with greater reliability by replacing the electronic components so that, well, we replaced both the track and electronic components so that the trains can run faster and also with fewer delays because of greater equipment reliability. Together with that, we're also planning a new siding called the Agnew Siding, which is located adjacent to the Santa Clara Great America station. This new siding will allow an additional place for Capital Corridor trains to meet and pass. Currently, between San Jose and Newark, there are no places as a single track railroad. So this cuts that single track segment in half, giving us an additional place to meet and pass trains. And it will also help with planning special trains to service the adjacent Levi Stadium near the Great America Station. That project, the design is nearing completion, and we hope to move to construction soon. There are a few more details on the design to work out with the stakeholders that include the Union Pacific Railroad and the city of Santa Clara. So that's ongoing. And finally, at the bottom of the page here is the Davis Crossover and Signal Replacement Project. This, again, like the Stige project, will replace the track crossovers with higher speed crossovers. So our trains won't have to slow down as much when they're changing from one track to another. And it will also replace the electronic signal components that keep the trains running safely with modern equipment that will have fewer delays due to equipment failure. The signal equipment in Davis is antiquated and needs to be upgraded. So that project, again, is nearing completion. We hope to move to construction very soon. And thinking about that, the Davis Crossover and Signal project is really a first step towards a project that's being led by Amtrak, which is to replace the boarding platforms at Davis that you can see in the picture here. The current configuration leaves something to be desired in terms of passenger safety and ADA accessibility. And so the plan that's being worked on will involve shifting the tracks and building a single center island platform, similar to what we have at the Fairfield-Vacaville station or Richmond, with grade separated access. So there'll be a pedestrian tunnel that will go underneath the tracks, and that will be the only way to access the single platform that's in between the tracks. So that project is a little bit further out. Like I say, Amtrak is leading that and hopes to have that complete by 2029. But this Davis Crossover and Signal Replacement project is a necessary precursor for it. So it's kind of like a phase one. Amtrak also has other stations that they have planned improvements for under their ADA stations program, similar to the Davis project. They are also making improvements at, or have completed, at Fremont, Hayward, Martinez, Richmond, Rockland, Roseville, and Suisun stations. So a lot of the stations will be improved for better ADA access. In some cases, the improvements are quite minor. In other cases, like Davis, they're very significant. So those programs that program is being led by Amtrak, and they have a federal funding source that pays for that. So that's really nice. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to Camille.
Thanks, Joel. Hi, everyone. I'm Camille Tsao, Manager of Special Projects. So just want to share with you a little bit about some of our projects. One of them is called Tap to Ride. It's part of the California Integrated Travel Program. And Tap to Ride is an ongoing pilot program for contactless payment on our trains. You may have seen the readers on our trains that are next to the doors. But basically what it is you use a registered credit card. You have to use a physical credit card to pay for your fare on the train. And it's got a lot of benefits. This is part of a California program that's being rolled out over several years. So it will allow anybody with a registered credit card to pay for a fare, not have to have a specific fare for that particular agency. So it would work, throughout California. whereas, Clipper is just for Bay Area transit agencies. But I know, many of you have wondered why we aren't part of Clipper, because we serve an area broader than the Bay Area. And so this works well for us and our customers because it can be used beyond the Bay Area. So each phase of Tap to Ride is going to have its own discount rate for the participants. One of the other benefits of Tap to Ride is something called fare capping, where once you reach a certain amount that you've paid in fares for a month, you'll be capped and you won't pay beyond the maximum. So anyways, look out for the additional future phases of Tap to Ride. You can use the link that's shown on the slide to register for it and start using it right away on our trains. Next is a fare policy update. So we've been conducting a study about our fares. They've been stable throughout the pandemic. We haven't changed our single ticket fares since 2019. And we haven't done a comprehensive study of our fares in over 10 years. So we are conducting it this year, looking at ways we can improve it. And one thing that we have noticed, that we have learned, is that we don't have many folks taking short trips on our trains. And a lot of that is because for that type of trip, our fares are high relative to other rail and transit systems for those short distance trips. So one of the first things that we're going to be doing as early as April of this year is looking at lowering the fares for those shorter distance trips, meaning trips that are under 50 miles in length. So look out for some announcements about that, but we're really hoping that we can encourage people that want to just travel those shorter distances to use our service for that through the fare adjustments. Tap to Ride fares will also be adjusted later on in the year as we continue refining that program. Next, about some of our longer term projects. Here are 3 of them. We have multiple projects in the work. Joel talked about some of the projects that we have. These are ones that are involving capacity increases, which means they would allow us to run more trains. And so these projects are more complex. They take longer to implement, to find funding for, to coordinate with UP. So one of them is the Sacramento to Roseville third track phase 1 project, which I believe Leo already mentioned. But this would allow us to increase our current service, which has 1 round trip a day, to 3 round trips. Eventually, if we are able to implement phase 2, we could get up to 10 round trips between Sacramento and Roseville. The next project is South Bay Connect, which is located between Oakland and San Jose. This would reroute our service to the Coast subdivision and would really help our service by decreasing travel times and reduce train congestion between freight trains and our passenger trains. It would also include a new Transbay bus across the Dumbarton Highway Bridge that improves the connections between the peninsula and the East Bay. And then third is the Link 21 program, which I've been working on since I joined Capital Corridor. It is a BART and Capital Corridor joint planning effort to look at a second Transbay crossing between Oakland and San Francisco. Of course, we have the BART tube that is in that corridor currently. But in this case, we'll be looking at another crossing, one that hopefully Capital Corridor and other operators could use, so that we could serve our customers who are going directly to San Francisco. I did see a question in the Q&A, which I can answer now, if that's okay.
Do you want to read the question first, Camille?
Yeah, sure. So Greg asks why the South Bay Connect project would remain in the Capital Corridor business plan if the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's Plan Bay Area 2050 plus deprioritized funding for this project in favor of the Irvington BART station. So I want to explain that when the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, they're the agency for the Bay Area that's responsible for preparing the transportation plan for our 9-county region, and you know, to be eligible for federal funding, projects need to be in that plan. Well, they do need to prepare a fiscally constrained plan, which is what Greg is referring to. They have to select a certain number of projects for that fiscally constrained plan. However, there is another category of projects that include South Bay Connect and Link 21. It doesn't mean that these are not important projects to the region, because they still are. It just means they aren't in the fiscally constrained category. We still need to plan for these longer term projects. They're complex. They still need funding. We still need to spend time on them, because they will provide significant benefits and improvements to our service. And in the case of Link 21, which is also in that category, it can benefit multiple operators. So just because we focus on some projects that are in the near term doesn't mean that we can lose sight of those other ones that are going to take longer to implement and take more coordination. So that's just the nature of capital projects in our business and in infrastructure. They take a long time, and we need to, you know, plan for the near, mid, and long term. So with that, I can hand it over to you, Sabrina, to
I actually, since we're talking about some other project related topics, I wonder if we want to cover just a few other questions on here. So a few from Andrew related to South Bay Connect. Is the Hayward Station going to be decommissioned when Capital Corridor goes on the coast sub at Ardenwood?
That is the proposal. And, you know, we have heard from some folks during our environmental phase about that. And I think removing service from existing stations is never an easy thing. So I think we're going to have continued conversations with the community about that, but that proposal was what was in the environmental document.
Mm-hmm. Two more related to South Bay Connect from Andrew. Can you upgrade the coastline with double tracking? I'll leave that to
Joel, you want to take that?
Sure. So I assume by the coastline we're talking about between Oakland Coliseum and Santa Clara Great America stations. And certainly upgrading that line with double tracking is something that would be very beneficial to the Capital Corridor service, and would no doubt permit us to run much more service in that corridor than we currently do today. And that, for instance, working on the Agnew siding project that I mentioned earlier is kind of like a tiny step in that direction, constructing a very short piece of that second track. So yes, an overall double tracking program for that entire route would be very beneficial to Capitol Corridor, and it's something that we would like to do someday in the future, but it is something that is constrained by the availability of funding to do so. And what we've learned through our planning project with the South Bay Connect project is that it's a very expensive project. And so it will no doubt take a long time before we are able to complete that. However, it is something that we do keep in mind, and we are working forward towards it in little steps, for instance, with the Agnew Siding project, as we can.
Awesome. And then just one additional project question. When is the Hercules Station for Capitol Corridor going to be built?
Joel or Camille, I don't know if either one of you.
I
think that's a long-term project that the city's working on.
Yeah, the city is seeking additional funding for that project. So
that the Hercules Station project is led by the city of Hercules, and they are eager proponents of building a new station there that could serve both the Capitol Corridor and San Joaquin Corridor services. However, again, it is something that is limited both by funding availability and also achieving the permission of the property owner, which is the Union Pacific Railroad, in order to build it. And both of those things have been difficult issues for the city to surmount, and is something they're still working on at this point. So I'm not sure that they have identified a particular opening date for that station yet.
Yep, I think that's accurate.
Okay.
There's also a couple of other questions that I saw in here that we can address. Andrew had another good question or comment about Fremont, and just specifically talking about the track usage. Sometimes track 1 is used, sometimes track 2 is utilized. That is actually one where we are looking to enhance and improve our passenger information display systems to also be able to give passengers better predictability of what is happening with our trains when they arrive to stations that have this configuration. And so look to see more from us on that side. We try to do as much as we can to stay consistent with where trains will generally be approaching. But again, this is a very limited part of the corridor with a lot of single tracking. So it's really tight often to be able to make that happen with regularity. I also saw another one that's kind of a completely different topic, but Andrew, this one was related to like kind of our Tap to Ride program / fare policy. You asked if we could use Clipper Card, and it was actually could help in some ways with people with disabilities. And I think the approach generally that we're taking with Tap to Ride, which is our contactless payment system, is that actually would be a really innovative way to provide equity solutions to people across very different demographics, whether it's disability or age eligibility or military status. And it is part of a broader statewide California integrated travel program. So stay in touch with us about what Tap to Ride is and how that's helping transform and improve transportation across the state. And let's see if there's anything else. I think there was another one, just a general comment about the cleanup at Coliseum. We are working to with the city. That is a city responsibility that we're engaged with them, and hopefully that gets cleaned up soon. I haven't been out there this week, but we are actively going there and seeing how that's progressing. And then we did answer the other question about service to Roseville. So I think we're good there. And then the COSA, we talked about that one. And let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, and unfortunately, we do not allow external technology to be placed on stations. And generally, stations are owned by the city. So any type of request actually doesn't go through Capitol Corridor, but generally goes through whoever the owner of the station is. All right. I think that addresses most of them. If we can keep going, and we'll address some of the other questions that come through. So back to you, Sabrina.
All right, so now we're going to talk about service enhancements and some of the updates that we've done and that we will be doing going into this year. So for our California Passenger Information Display System, or CalPIDS modernization project, we are implementing software and hardware upgrades for better communications with customers at stations and on the platform. For Wi-Fi on board, we have improved stability and performance for our onboard Wi-Fi system. And we're also offering new types of entertainment, including free movies, which if you've been on board our train and have used Wi-Fi, you've seen our movies. We do change those regularly, but we're also offering, we'll update soon, our audiobook selection as well. For food service, our cafe cart continues to add new items and specials. We also have continued our seasonal happy hours, which this week for our workshops, we are hosting happy hour starting tomorrow through Thursday. So from 3 to 7 p.m. on all trains. So look out for that. And you may also see some incremental price increases for select items. We usually let everyone know ahead of time via our digital communications. And so we would let you know if we do that as well. And then lastly, for our ADA accessibility improvements, we've completed improvements at several stations, and our planning is underway for major improvements at Emeryville, Richmond, Suisun, Fairfield, Davis, and Rockland. And again, you can expect to see communications about this work, especially if it impacts service in any way. And then for our marketing and communications, so we want to really continue to provide a great experience for our customers, and we'll focus on increasing advertising and brand awareness by reaching a diverse range of audiences and emphasize Capital Corridor's comfort and convenience, and really strengthen partnerships in various industries that are aligned with our service, such as sports teams, visitors bureaus, and transit agencies and other entertainment companies. We also really want to improve our experience in communications by analyzing ridership trends, really understanding who our riders are as things change with remote work, who our leisure audiences, enhancing our digital and onboard experiences, leveraging technology to deliver timely communications. So this again goes back to our CalPIDS system and the upgrades that we're doing with that. We also really want to showcase Capital Corridor's alignment with mega regional transportation goals, as well as connect and strengthen our ties with local communities along our route. So that's in the form of engagement and community outreach that we want to do that. And we are nearing the end of our workshop. So before we go into more question and answer, our question and answer period, just again, you can submit a public comment in various ways. One is to submit a comment within this workshop, this online workshop, through the Q&A feature. You can also submit it on our comment form, which you can find on our business plan page on capitalcorridor.org. You can submit a comment by mail or leave a voicemail at the number that you see on the screen. And just as a reminder, the submission deadline is Friday, February 28th, 2025. And so at this point, we'll go into the question and answer session. We have one open question. So again, for anyone on the line, please feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask any question you'd like on this plan that we just reviewed, but also if you have any other questions regarding our service, we're happy to answer them. So this is one from Andrew. Can you guys please reach out to my adult day program, Inspire Hire, and ask them if they would like to see improvement on Capital Corridor? So yes, Andrew, we can take that back and reach out as needed for sure.
Yeah, and also if you want to provide our information or hand them the link to the annual business plan, then that is also a great way for them to interact with us as well. There's another one through.
Yeah, another one from Amy. Can there be more cross-bay buses during the work week between San Francisco and Emeryville, especially between 5 and 7?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. Amy, thanks for your question. So the San Francisco to Emeryville connection is one for us that is probably the most expensive, especially when you look at a per rider basis. We are constantly looking to see, how we're doing on demand and how that's progressing. We are actually currently serving that bus route in probably the most efficient way that we're able to do so, with 3 buses versus pre-pandemic where we ran 8 buses. And that is a unique service where we pay on a per bus basis. So we're really trying, not to increase the cost of the overall service, both internally and externally. So that is one that we're actually currently looking and evaluating. I think one of the feedback that we actually heard, and we've heard in the last few years, has been about entering Salesforce Transit Center. And we were and are continuing to work with AC Transit to see what better open door solutions that we can be able to provide that can both provide this connection for intercity passenger rail, but also provide just the regular open door service through the communities that AC Transit serves. Right now, we're looking to see what that cost looks like, and can we do that with our current contract operator. And so, doing that actually will mean, a potential increase in fares to offset the increased cost. But that is something that we are considering given the popularity of the route and just the inconvenience that happens when riders are out there in the elements, especially during this time of year when we do have rain showers that are affecting our region. So I would say, I guess it's unlikely that we would add more buses, just given the increased cost.
Another question is for multi-riders. What should we do if our early morning connecting bus is a no-show? Can we get a partial reimbursement for a multi-ride pass?
Anytime whenever that happens, please let us know so we can take that back to Amtrak, and normally we'll ask them to, try to, do something of that nature, like offer some sort for some sort of inconvenience that happened that had nothing to do with the rider and that was negatively affected the rider. So please let us know, and we're happy to redirect you to Amtrak if you are unable to do so through the normal customer service number.
All right, this question is from Amy. Also, the tap to ride doesn't work for Sacramento to San Francisco, so I end up using my tap card fewer times than if I could if it were available.
Yep, I'm happy to take that question, Amy, and have some potentially good news for you. It's not happening immediately, but that is actually one of our top on our list for tap to ride integration. So we are looking at the Emeryville to San Francisco buses, and there will be first on our list in order of us getting the tap to ride readers on board, and that will give us the next iteration of integration, which it will be, seeing how tap to ride works with other travel modes. We do have some other partners that are actively working on, and I think that will be a good news story for us. I don't have a specific time frame for you just yet, but I am confident that we'll have that out for you this year. We're just working through the logistics and getting that actually pulled off.
All right, this one's from Andrew. I've been asking them to take CC from, I think this is in relation to the previous question, to take Capital Corridor from Fremont to San Jose, but our group is only from 7 to 1 p.m. And I really wish my group can take the CC from Fremont to San Jose and Fremont to Emeryville and Richmond for a field trip. So.
Yeah, and thanks for your question again. And you're throwing so many good feedback and comments for us, so we really appreciate that. So once we get back to full service, and that will be for later this fall, we are definitely wanting and eager to get back to serving the group travel as we used to prior to the pandemic when we did have full service. And exactly what you're highlighting is we just need to make sure sufficient number of trains and also covering the right time gaps. We are aware that we have a pretty extended gap south of Oakland during the times you shared. So that actually is top of our list when we look to improve the schedule, and it will give us the ability to get out there and start offering group travel as we did before. So just stay tuned in terms of how the service is looking to go back to full service.
Great. Next question, do you see the new administration affecting Capital Corridor funding in the future? Does Capital Corridor rely on federal funding? I think Camille can take that on.
Yep.
So we primarily rely on state funding. There have been a few, we have obtained federal funding for a couple projects, but those, just affect those particular projects. One thing we are involved in right now is the Corridor ID program, which is a new thing that the federal government, the Federal Railroad Administration, created for long-term planning and improvements on intercity passenger rail. So that was created with the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it funds states across the country. And so we're hoping that the current administration sees the value in continuing that program, given that it benefits most of the states in this country. So we will see on that. But yeah, luckily, most of our funding comes from the state.
All right, and I see Leo sending an answer to Andrew for another question. So we'll move on to Amy's. Who handles the parking payment machines at the Sacramento Station lot? The new machines are having problems reading credit cards and are also rarely offering receipts.
That is managed by Sacramento, the city of Sacramento, but we are happy to take that back and provide the feedback to them and see what we can do to address that.
Awesome. And there's just one more question from Andrew to his previous one. Will you allow news and media just like they did with the BART cars? Can we do the same thing with Capital Corridor passenger toy trains debut?
We'll have to see what that's all about and figure out if that's possible. Just one thing that I want to share, Andrew, is we are a pretty small staff. It's about 19 of us total. So there's often many things that we want to do, but we unfortunately can't take them all on.
All right. I see no other questions in the chat, in the Q&A. However, in the chat, just for folks still on the call, Kai has linked the comment form. So if you want to submit a comment after this webinar or this workshop, you can go ahead and do so by clicking on that link. But we still have about 2 minutes in case anyone has one last question.
And thanks so much for all of you that joined during lunch hour to talk about Capital Corridor and the great things that are coming immediately in the short term, and then also the long-term plans that we're all on this ride with you to get some of these great improvements done.
Yeah, definitely. And as a reminder, this workshop is being recorded, so you can go ahead and check that out on our YouTube channel next week. We also have another virtual workshop on Friday at the same time, which will also be on our YouTube channel next week. And we have a slew of onboard workshops tomorrow through Thursday. So feel free to check those out. The schedules are on our website, on the business plan page, on our social media channels. We also sent out a newsletter with the schedule as well. So please feel free to subscribe to our e-newsletter, to follow us on social, to check out our website, and visit the business plan page to look at the plan more closely. And okay, we have one more question. Will the summer schedule be released in the spring, March?
So thanks for the question. And on the one front, we've been being a little cautious on how we're approaching that question. I think that what I'll say is that we really are trying to get it done before the summer. I think right now the most realistic time frame is probably in May. So just stay in touch with us, and we'll be eager to post the schedule changes as soon as we are able to. Normally we try to get it out a month in advance of the change, so you'll have plenty of time to hopefully digest that and see how it affects you. All right.
Well, thank you. Okay, thank you all for attending, and this is the end of our workshop for today.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.